Hello friends and welcome to Parks Crafty Creations. I'm your host Brian Parks. Today we're going to talk about something that every sewist uses, but very few people truly understand. We're getting back to the basics with a lesson even some of my more experienced sewing friends out there might benefit from. We're taking a deep dive into sewing machine needles. Before we jump in, if you enjoy this content, be sure to give us a like down below, as it really does help out the channel. Do it now please, and if you're new to our channel, don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell icon so you'll always be notified whenever a new video drops. And hey, if you love what we do here, don't forget to share us with your friends. Now that the housekeeping is out of the way, we've got a lot to cover. So, let's jump in. If you've ever struggled with skipped stitches, puckering, thread breakage, or a project that just didn't turn out the way you expected, there's a very good chance the problem wasn't your sewing machine, your tension, or even your skill level. Sewing machine needles are one of the most overlooked tools in sewing, yet they're responsible for the majority of stitching problems that people run into. Using the correct needle can completely transform how a project turns out, and using the wrong one can quietly ruin even the best fabric and the most careful stitching. So, in this video, we're going to slow things down and really break sewing machine needles apart so they actually make sense. We'll talk about the anatomy of a needle, how to choose the correct needle system for your machine, how to match needle type and size to your fabric and thread, and finally, when it's time to change your needle, even if it looks perfectly fine. By the end of this video, my goal is that you not only understand the different types of sewing machine needles, but that you feel confident choosing one for your project, using it correctly, and knowing when it's time to change it. I also want to make sure you don't feel paralyzed by choice. You don't need every needle ever made to be a good sewist, and we're going to talk about that too. Before we talk about which needle to buy, it really helps to understand what the parts of a needle actually do. So, let's start with the anatomy of a sewing machine needle, because once you understand how a needle is built and what each part does, everything else becomes much easier to understand. At the top of the needle is the shank. This is the part that gets inserted into your sewing machine. Most home sewing machines use needles with a flat side on the shank. That flat side is there to ensure the needle sits in the correct position, so the machine's timing works properly. On most modern machines, the flat side of the needle faces toward the back, but there are machines where it faces to the side. So, this is one of those moments where checking your manual really matters. If you look closely at the shank, you may see tiny etched numbers. These usually indicate the needle size and sometimes the brand. They're very small and many people never notice them, but they can be helpful if you're trying to identify a loose needle that may have become separated from its packaging. Just below the shank is the shoulder. This is where the thicker shank transitions into the thinner blade of the needle. Some brands use colored bands near the shoulder to help identify the needle type or size. While this can be helpful, color coding varies by brand, so it's best used as a visual reminder rather than your only source of information. Below the shoulder is the blade, which is the long, narrow body of the needle. The thickness of the blade determines the needle size. Thicker blades are stronger and designed for heavier fabrics such as denim, while thinner blades are meant for lightweight or delicate fabrics like silk or chiffon. Running down the front of the blade is a groove. This groove holds the thread as the needle moves through the fabric. The thread tucks into this groove, which reduces friction and allows the stitch to form smoothly. The size and depth of the groove vary depending on the needle type and the thickness of thread it's designed to handle. Near the bottom of the needle is the eye. This is the hole that thread passes through. Sewing machine needles' eyes are located close to the tip, unlike hand sewing needles. The size of the eye changes depending on the needle type, and larger eyes are used for thicker threads like top stitching or metallic thread. At the very bottom of the needle is the point. This is the sharp end that actually penetrates the fabric. The shape of the point is one of the most important differences between needle types. Some points are very sharp and designed to pierce fibers, while others are rounded so they slide between fibers instead of cutting them. On the back of the needle, just above the eye, is a small indentation called the scarf. This allows the bobbin hook to pass close enough to catch the thread and form a stitch. Without this indentation, the machine would not be able to stitch properly. Now that we understand the anatomy of a needle, let's talk about the 3 things you must know to choose the correct sewing machine needle. These 3 things are the needle system, the needle type, and the needle size. The needle system, sometimes called the needle class, refers to the length of the needle, the shape of the shank, and how it fits into your sewing machine. Every sewing machine is designed to work with a specific needle system. If you're starting to feel overwhelmed at this point, don't worry. The good news is that most modern domestic sewing machines use the same standard needle system. You may see it labeled as 130-705, 15 by 1, or HA by 1, or sometimes by a manufacturer-specific name. These all refer to the same basic system. If you're using a serger, overlocker, or cover stitch machine, those machines often use different needle systems, so checking your manual is essential. Older machines, especially vintage machines, may require a different needle system. If you don't have the manual, many manuals can be found online as PDFs, or through sewing machine archives. Before you worry about needle type or size, always make sure the needle system matches your machine. The type and size won't make a difference if you're using a needle from the wrong system to begin with. Once you know the correct needle system, the next thing to consider is needle type. Needle type refers to the shape of the point and how the needle interacts with fabric. This is where most people start to feel overwhelmed. So, let's slow it down and make it practical. If you could only choose one type of needle to own, it would probably be the universal needle. Universal needles are designed to work fairly well on most fabric types. They're called universal not because they fit all machines, but because they can sew most fabrics reasonably well. The point of a universal needle falls somewhere between sharp and rounded, which allows it to handle woven fabrics and some stable knits. Many sewing machines come with universal needles, and it's completely normal to use universal needles for the majority of your projects. In fact, many sewists use universal needles for about 90% of what they sew. If you ever feel overwhelmed by needle choices, buying a pack of assorted universal needles is a perfectly valid approach. Universal needles come in a range of sizes. Smaller sizes like 70-10 are better for lightweight fabrics like silk or satin, while sizes like 90-14 are better for medium weight fabrics like quilting cotton or twill. Some universal needles come in heavier sizes such as 100-16, which are excellent for sewing through multiple layers. These heavier universal needles are especially useful if you do a lot of bag making, upcycling, or layered sewing. Next, let's talk about ballpoint needles. Ballpoint needles are designed for knit fabrics. The tip of the needle is slightly rounded, which allows it to slide between the loops of the knit rather than piercing them. This helps prevent runs, holes, and fabric damage. Ballpoint needles are great for lightweight knits like t-shirts and jersey fabric. Closely related to ballpoint needles are jersey needles. Jersey needles are even more rounded and are designed for stretchier knit fabrics. The extra rounding helps the needle push the fibers aside instead of cutting into them, which is especially important for fabrics with a lot of stretch and recovery, such as spandex blends. Using the correct needle for stretchy fabrics can dramatically reduce skipped stitches and fabric distortion. Stretch needles are another option for highly elastic fabrics. These needles are designed specifically to prevent skipped stitches when sewing fabrics that stretch as they move under your presser foot. If you're sewing athletic wear, swimwear, or very stretchy knits, a stretch needle can make a noticeable difference. For heavier fabrics, denim or jean needles are a must. These needles are stronger and have sharper points designed to penetrate dense, tightly woven fabrics like denim, canvas, and upholstery fabric. If you have ever bent or broken a needle while sewing jeans or thick seams, switching to a denim needle is most often the answer to your problem. Heavy-duty needles take this a step further. These needles come in larger sizes, such as 110-18, and are designed for very thick materials and multiple layers. If you frequently sew heavy fabrics and are tired of breaking needles, a heavy-duty needle can save you a lot of frustration. However, the fabric needs to be able to handle a needle this thick without being damaged. Leather needles are a specialty needle designed specifically for leather and vinyl. These needles have extremely sharp cutting points that pierce through tough, coated materials. They're especially important for sewing vinyl or plastic-coated fabrics, which can be very hard on regular needles. Because leather needles cut holes rather than pushing fibers aside, they should only be used on materials where visible holes are acceptable. Microtex needles have very sharp, fine points and are ideal for synthetic fabrics like polyester, nylon, microfiber, vinyl, cork fabric, and waxed canvas. They're also excellent for precise stitching where accuracy matters, such as top stitching straight seams or sewing detailed work. Top stitch needles are designed for decorative stitching and thicker threads. They have larger eyes and deeper grooves, which allow heavy thread to pass smoothly through the fabric. If you're using top stitching thread and experiencing thread breakage or uneven stitches, switching to a top stitch needle often solves the problem immediately. Quilting needles are designed to pass through multiple layers of fabric and batting without damaging the fibers. Even though quilting cotton itself is not very heavy, the layers add resistance, and quilting needles are specially designed to handle that smoothly. Metallic needles are designed specifically for metallic thread. Metallic thread can be very finicky. Here I have a metallic thread, and just by the feel of it, it feels like I'm handling a spool of wire more than a spool of thread. These needles help reduce friction and prevent shredding and breakage. If you're going to work with metallic threads, a metallic needle is a must. Finally, there are twin needles and triple needles. These needles have 2 or 3 needles mounted on a single shank, and are commonly used for hemming knit garments like t-shirts. They create parallel rows of stitching on the top of the fabric while allowing the seam to stretch. Twin needles can be used on many regular sewing machines as long as the needle plate has a wide enough opening. Now let's talk about needle size in more detail. Needle sizes are usually shown as 2 numbers, such as 80-12 or 90-14. The larger the numbers, the thicker and stronger the needle. Smaller needles are used for lightweight fabrics, while larger needles are used for heavier, more tightly woven fabrics. However, fabric weight is only part of the equation. Thread thickness matters just as much. The thread needs to fit comfortably into the groove of the needle. If the needle is too small for the thread will rub against the needle and fabric, causing breakage, skipped stitches, and uneven tension. The goal is to use the smallest needle that can handle both the fabric and the thread without bending or distorting the material. Sewing machine needles are usually sold in packs of 5, and assorted packs are a great option if you're still learning. When inserting a needle, always follow your machine's manual. A needle inserted incorrectly can cause stitching problems and even damage the machine. One of the most common questions sewists ask is when to change their needle. A general guideline is to change your needle after about every 8 hours of sewing or after every 2 or 3 projects. You should also change your needle after sewing synthetic fabrics, if you hit a pin, or if you notice skipped stitches, thread shredding, jamming, or fabric damage. It's also important to remember that even brand new needles can occasionally be defective. If something feels off and nothing has changed, swapping in a new needle is always a good troubleshooting step. Most sewing problems come down to the needle being the wrong type, the wrong size, damaged, or inserted incorrectly. Checking your needle is quick, inexpensive, and often fixes the problem immediately. Even I have had times when something just didn't feel right. I was getting bird nesting, thread breakage, skipped stitches, or thread tension oddities. One of the most telling symptoms I've found right off the bat was the sound of my machine when stitching. Listen to your machine. If something doesn't sound right or feel right, stop immediately. Cut your thread, remove your fabric, and do a check. These sounds are your machine talking to you. It's your responsibility to listen to it and take the necessary steps to avoid problems. Ignoring this, at best, can lead to bad stitching, bird nesting, or puckering, which is frustrating enough. But on the other end, it could lead to broken needles or a busted machine that requires expensive repairs to your machine. So, don't risk it. When disposing of old needles, make sure to do so safely. Place them in a container or wrap them in tape to protect anyone who might come in contact with them later. I like to use old, empty medicine bottles like this one, with the label removed. I hope this video helped turn sewing machine needles from something confusing into something you feel confident about. If you have questions, leave them in the comments. If this video helped you out, give it a thumbs up. This really goes a long way to telling the YouTube algorithm to show this video to other viewers who might find it helpful like you. And if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell icon so you'll never miss out whenever a new video drops. Thank you so much for joining me today. I've been Brian Parks for Parks Crafty Creations. Happy sewing, and we'll see you next time.